Saturday, September 20, 1862, morning. Location, Butler's Ford near Shepherdstown, Virginia. The dam break was still littered with the equipment and belongings of General Robert E. Lee's retreating army that had slipped back over the river from Sharpsburg there during the night of Thursday and Friday. America's bloodiest day in its military history had just occurred September 17th in Sharpsburg, but Lee got away. Colonel Charles M. Prevost led his green enlistees, the 118th Pennsylvania Infantry Regiment, in pursuit of the rebel army, crossing the ford into Virginia. His men had joined after being paid handsome bonuses provided by the brokers of the Corn Exchange Association of Philadelphia. Colonel Prevost had successfully crossed the ford with his men, partly because of an effective battery at the ready behind them on the Maryland shore. The colonel began carrying out an order to send his men to the top of the cliffs by way of this narrow road through a ravine. A reconnaissance had just found that the cliffs concealed Major General A.P. Hill's light division, and two others were advancing rapidly to join him at the ford. A message that was rushed to Prevost by a young lieutenant to retreat had been brushed aside as an improperly delivered order. So his young men marched up the ravine road to suddenly find themselves in a hail of bullets coming from the woods to the right, the left, and straight ahead. At the top of the road, they drew their 1853 Enfields to fire back, and the whole batch turned out to be defective. Barrels defective, ramrods jammed, mainsprings were too weak to explode the primers. A.P. Hill called it the worst slaughter in all his years of fighting that war. As chance would have it, a Colonel Barnes, who had led the reconnaissance ahead of the young Corn Exchange recruits, met up with Prevost, but only after he found Prevost seriously wounded with a bullet in the shoulder, and Prevost told Barnes that he had not gotten an order to retreat. Meantime, the charging rebels literally drove the young Corn Exchange men over the cliffs and into the river under withering fire. Their abandoned Enfields littered the ground. Rebel sharpshooters picked off young men swimming desperately across the ford, especially the two men carrying the colors. The artillery from the Maryland side were firing far short of the cement mill on the Virginia side, where the sharpshooters were perched. Instead, they hit the men in the river. Some of the men in the river's middle tied handkerchiefs to their bayonets and begged to be taken prisoner by the Confederates. When it was over, 269 out of 700 men were killed or wounded. Many others were not accounted for. That evening, Lemuel Crocker of the Corn Exchange Regiment, innocent in the cruel ways of war, heard the cries of his wounded comrades on the Virginia side, and on his own personal errand of mercy, crossed the ford. The shocked rebel soldiers called him crazy to come. He just wanted to bring some of his wounded friends back across the river for care. His compassion dispelled for a moment the cruel rule of war, and they let him do so and wished Lemuel Crocker well.